I'm going to work on an old project, old but not forgotten, that I started, gosh, probably a year ago. And I let it sit aside because I couldn't figure out how to finish it. And I expanded it and created more issues for myself. And I just I tossed it in the corner in the studio because that's what we do, right? And said I would come back to it later. And later is now. I figured out how to finish it, and it's different. It's not my wildscapes. It's still kind of wild, but it is not my typical wildscape, which is why I want to get it done now, because I want to work on more 3D art rather than what I would consider surface art. So let me turn the camera around and I can tell you what I mean. So this is the piece. And it was kind of when I started experimenting with textures, really trying to go more vertical with my textures. These are really hard. You can't hear it, but there are bottle caps under here because that was what I had seen somebody do. And so I put down a bottle cap, and I think I put some wool roving over it, and then I covered it with French knots. And while I like the effect, let me hold this up here so you can see, I like the effect. It wasn't a whole lot of fun to try and stitch through that. Same thing over here. It's just a smaller bottle cap. I started playing, this is when I first started playing with adding grasses and some eyelash trim. What I really liked was the idea of these ferns coming out. So I was just kind of playing, and I was playing on this beige fabric. And then I had everything so close to the edge over here that I couldn't finish it. I couldn't finish it in the hoop. I couldn't finish it on something else. So then I put it on this green wool felt, and it was still very lovely to stitch on. That was great, except again, I had things just cattywampus and they weren't going to finish right. And so I thought, it's got to go on a larger piece. Now I think a little bit more about that before I get started, but this piece, to be saved, had to go on a larger piece. And I'm thinking I'll stretch it over I think it's a 10 by 10 inch canvas that I have. So it was going to have to go on another piece of canvas, another piece of fabric of some kind as well. Now it could also become a wall hanging, but I think I'm going to stretch it over a canvas. But in order to attach these two things, so I had my beige fabric, then I had the wool felt, then I stitched it to this green thing, and then realizing I needed to go even larger, I fused it with some heat and bond to this larger fabric. So now I'm going through a bunch of fabrics to stitch, and it's not fun, which is kind of when I threw stuff away. I had cut the edges out, trying to see if I could make it fit. That created another problem. I had all these little flappy edges that suddenly, I didn't want to glue down. So I've been going around with a very fine thread and tacking them down, which, let me tell you, is not a whole lot of fun. So I've just kind of been going around, coming up in the stitches and going back down. And so I've still got a little bit of that to do, and I won't bore you with that. So I've got a little bit still here to take down. But on this side, I've started to do what I think I need to do to finish, and that is to continue the fern stitch coming off of my green edges. It's going to hold this down a lot more, and it's going to continue the story out to the edges because I don't want to build up anything any taller out here. We start high and it gets a little bit lower, and then it's going to go down to the very lowest edge. And so when I finish this over the canvas, if some of these end up going over the edge, I'm going to be okay with that. What I'm stitching with here is some of my favorite stuff to use when I stitch, and that is wool yarn. This is merino wool. This particular beautiful color is called Moss Tonal from Black Sheep Dye Works on Etsy. They also have a website by the same name. And I actually don't need really long pieces because I just have to come out a little bit. And all I'm going to do is just the simple fern stitch. And I love the fern stitch because I can get these wonderful little curls all over the place. So let's see, I can come, so this part over here is tacked down. Let us just continue the fern. So I'm just going to come up where one of my frond edges is, and then go right back down there. And then I'm going to bring it out onto the darker green. This is a really forgiving stitch, both for angles and the fact that I don't want to be precise. You know, fern fronds, you could be very precise and you could make all of them the same length. That would never happen if I was doing it. None of it would ever be the same length. I could, honestly, I could get out a ruler and mark out every straight stitch so that it was exactly the same length like you would see in one of those printed kits. Mine would still not be. They would all go wonky. So good thing that I am embracing the idea of being an imperfect stitcher, an imperfect artist, because in those little pockets of imperfection is where all the magic happens, at least in my book. If you are still beating yourself up for one reason or another, because we all carry baggage, right? You can't help it. If you're beating yourself up for one reason or another about the kind of artist you are or are not, please stop. Please stop, because we are all so wonderfully creative. We're all more creative than we think. Your art, whatever it is that you are working on, I don't care if you are a stitcher, a painter, a collage artist, a potter, a cake decorator, whatever it is that you make, you're the only one that can make it the way you make it. I've said it before and I will say it again. We could all start off with the same kit, with all the same materials, the same printed pattern. We are not going to all make the same kind of art. Because I should tell you how I'm doing the fern stitch right. That would be the way to do a demo. I am not a traditional demo artist teacher, but if you want to know how to do something that I'm doing, ask me a question and I will do my best to answer it. So the fern stitch, you're going to come up somewhere with a straight stitch. Now I'm joining my previous straight stitches. I can go up on either side. And then traditionally you're going to come up not quite the full length of this stitch. My end is here. I'm going to come up just a little bit shy of the end. Let's see if I go like that, you can see. And then you come right back down at the same hole. And the same thing on the other side. And there's just something about a trailing fern. One of the things that I have learned working on this piece is that I really do not like stitching through heat and bond. It is a strain, and so I don't use it anymore. I might stitch through 2 layers of fabric, but I will just lay one on top of the other. I might glue stick down the edges a little bit if I need to, but most of the time I don't need to. Most of the time it's in a hoop. This piece is too big for the hoops that I normally use, although I did just get a couple really, really big ones. And when I think about it later, it's like, oh, I could actually probably do that in a hoop, and that might be a good idea. So my hope is that by carrying these stitches off of my wool felt, it's going to just give the trailing a little bit, I don't know, a little bit more delicate feel to the edges, and it's going to help hold down this felt a little bit more, because I'm going to do a lot of it. Is this a stitch that you use? Let me know. All right, and just for the heck of it, to show you what I mean, I'm going to, I have enough to do it. I'm just going to come over here, and I'm going to come off this little edge here of this frond. It's not a center point, and I don't care, because I don't think it's going to matter in the giant scheme of things. I picture that this thing is just overgrown and there's just fronds going out all over the place, and that's going to work for me. And that's going to hold down that little edge of green just a little bit more. You can make very short stitches, long stitches, mix them up. There have been times where I've taken the time to go very slow and try and get them all about the same size, and that's a really pretty effect as well. I can just kind of curve this right back up here. It's hard to have a lot of unfinished pieces hanging around because you evolve as an artist, and the longer they sit, the harder it can be sometimes to go back to that spot that you used to be. So I'm kind of pushing myself. I have 3 pieces that I consider more surface embroidery. They're going to be flatter, that I would really like to see myself get done. That's the whole idea, get it done. All right, so now you can see how just kind of extending the fronds, and I think that's going to work out very nicely. I'll be back when this thing is done to show you what it looks like.